This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Ben Settle, super practical.
I'm not telling people to have a mistress. I'm teaching you, learn the lesson from the people who have a mistress, because there's many business lessons that apply.
Pious.
There's a part in the book of Revelation where Jesus says, I want you either hot or cold. I'm spewing lukewarm churches out. And I think it's a good way to look at your list.
Romantic to his very core.
Once in a while, I'll give my girl a present, like a Snickers bar or something.
And totes tender.
If someone asks you to walk on eggshells, smash the eggshells and let the chips fall wherever they may.
Adored by feminists everywhere.
It takes a strong woman to admit when she's wrong.
Not a judgmental bone in his entire body.
I look at all the free information people give just on Facebook and I go, what a bunch of time hose.
Has a PhD in armchair philosophy.
In the land of dumbasses, the smartass is king.
You'll never meet a more sensitive guy.
If you really care about people, you shame the hell out of them. This is Ben Settle, the bensettle.com podcast. And so on the last show, I said I was going to talk about shaming, why I'm pro-shaming, Jonathan, much to the horror of certain people listening to this probably. Oh my God, you can't shame people so mean. Okay, I'm not. Okay. First of all, let me just get a few things out in the open here before we start this, because it's amazing to me how people just like get so like, they get very touchy about this. And, you know, maybe because they know they're about to be shamed for something. I don't know, John. Yeah, I don't know, man. If people hadn't shamed me in my youth, God knows where I'd be right now. I mean, really, I'm thankful for people's shame. I don't know what I'd be doing. I'm glad I got shamed for certain things, for being, you know, I was kind of an unconfident, weakly guy and everything, especially in like high school and all that. I'm glad people shamed the hell out of me. It worked. It took a while, but, you know, that kind of stuff worked. It builds up. But I'll say this. Okay. A, I don't think it's necessarily the first resort when you want to change somebody's behavior. Okay, I'm not. B, society used to have shaming mechanisms built in, so we didn't have to do it. You know, there were just certain things that, you know, it was like shameful. You weren't supposed to do it. You weren't supposed to be the town ho, you know? Okay, now it's like someone could be the town ho and, you know, people are gonna have to shame them. Yeah, it was like, you know, now it's like it's not in the culture. A lot of these things aren't embedded in the culture. It used to be that, you know, if you were super overweight and everything and a danger to yourself and your kids are about to go, you know, be homeless, if you die because they're relying on you, that was something that like society just kind of, that was built in. Now you got to tell people. And then they get mad and saying all this stuff. So it's not done as a first resort. It's not, and it's also not done on, you don't do it to be mean. Now, Jonathan, coming from me to not, usually I joke about being mean. You can't do it to be, you have to, if you're going to shame somebody, and we will tie this to marketing and selling and all that, I promise you that, you have to actually care about them. I mean, that's the only reason you're doing it. You're not, if you didn't care about them, why would you even bother? In fact, if you don't care about someone, don't shame them. So let them keep doing what they're doing. You see them about to walk off a cliff, don't shame them for, you know, not being smart enough to like look where they're walking. Okay, go ahead. But the reality is you have to do it sometimes, and you have to do it to your list and market sometimes, especially if they're steeped in bad advice. And, you know, of course, depending on what niche you're in, I think most people can agree that most niches are steeped in bad advice to some degree or another. And sometimes a little shaming has to happen. Now, this is something that's been going on for thousands of years. It's like done in every religion. Now, I know there's some heathens listening. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but atheists do it too. They shame religious people all the time. Everybody's doing it to each other. It's already happening. It's just that, what is your reason for doing it? You know, is it to kick a crutch out from under them? Or is it to actually help them? It works today. You know, okay, so I don't remember this book exactly, Jonathan, but I'm going on memory here. Maybe you've read it. I don't know. But one of Stephen King's earlier books, Firestarter. Did you ever read that book?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I read it a long time ago, and I the movie to me wasn't that good. The book was very interesting because little Charlie McGee, the little girl in the book, she has these powers where she can start fires with her mind. It's very powerful, right? Like, wouldn't that be a cool power to have? I would think so. But she wasn't always having control over it. And how she gained control, how her parents, her dad loved her a lot, you know, was always trying to protect her from the government and everything, and from being on the radars and all that. What her dad did to keep her from, you know, to teach her this. And I'm going on memory here, so some Stephen King nerd might tell me I'm wrong about this, but it doesn't matter. The point holds. How he got her to not just get emotional and use her powers to burn up everything in sight was he kind of like taught her it was bad, shameful to use them, kind of like going to the bathroom in your pants. It's basically this analogy he used. Now, don't you shame a kid if they're constantly pooping their pants? Or do you sit there and coddle them some more? Jonathan, the child that you got, you and Cupcake have. What are you going to do if he shits on the floor? You're not going to shame him?
Bro. I'm sending him back. That's what I'm doing.
He's going to send him back. You're going to shame him. But that's my whole point. Like, shaming, potty training is done by shaming in a lot of cases, you know? Even if you have a dog, okay, the dog doesn't, you're shaming the dog. It works. And, you know, suddenly people think you're not supposed to do it because feels. And now we have the most undisciplined group of people that have probably ever lived in the cushiest country that's ever lived. And this is not going to last forever. I don't want to go into my nihilistic views of what's going to happen to this country, but I will if you want me to, Jonathan. I don't, you know,
that's a whole episode.
It's a whole episode. But the reality is this, the good times are not going to last. They never do. Everybody thought they were going to last during the Great Depression. They didn't. Everyone thought that. I always think they're going to last. They don't. And what happens is because people get weak, and that's just what happens. This is history, and I believe it's because a part of it, at least, is due to a lack of shaming. So that's my build up to this before we go into this, because I already know there's some people listening to this, some mush cookies especially. I ain't gonna shame. Listen, I'm not saying to be mean about it. In fact, I think that's the wrong way to go about it. But to say it doesn't work is just idiotic. Okay, it's worked forever. It's going to keep working. And if you care about your market and you care about your loved ones, you will use this tool when needed. So, for example, let's talk about everyone's kind of favorite shaming, Jonathan, which is fat shaming. Now, you're kind of a fat guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're
in all the right places.
you're a fat guy. I mean, you're a fat guy. You're like Santa Claus. Okay, I've seen you. All right, but let's say the real life example. So, the late great comedian Patrice O'Neal, whose show, The Black Phillip Show, was a huge influence for this show and my old podcast, the Entrepreneur Show. Okay, I like the way he did his show, and he was a big guy. Like, he was, I don't know how many, he weighed a lot. I don't know if he was like 300 pounds. He was a lot. He's a big guy, and he he had like 500 blood sugar when he was like in his 20s.
Wow.
Right? Like, this guy, this dude was like a walking, he was like a walking blood sugar. It's like he's just walking around, and he had diabetes. Really, his whole life pretty much he had diabetes. Always struggling with it. I mean, you can go on Google and read his interviews. It's very interesting. And what happened was, and I'm sure I've told this story on here, but not from a shaming perspective. Now this guy had his mom dependent on him, and his girlfriend or fiance, I believe, and his fiance's daughter dependent on him. They were depending on him to bring home they were family, and he didn't. He took his medicine and all that, but obviously didn't take it that seriously, because one day he wakes up and he can't move his legs. Just wakes up and he can't move his legs. Calls his girlfriend, saying, I can't move my legs. By the time she gets there, and I'm going on memory here, but this is in a Rolling Stone article from 2011 or 12. He died in late 2011. Later, next, he couldn't move his arms. He couldn't move his body. He couldn't even blink eventually. He was just existing in his body like a starfish or an amoeba or something. It's like, and this is a guy who made his living talking, he was the most extroverted guy. He was a comedian, and suddenly he can't do anything. He's just existing in his body. And then I think a week or two later, he died, and he left, his mom and his girlfriend is now like always trying to pike all of his, whatever products he had, like his recordings and stuff. And, I don't know how that's working out or anything, but nobody shamed him properly. Nobody shamed. Now, you could, if you've read much of his stuff or listened to him much, he's not going to be the easiest guy in the world to shame, but he was intellectually honest enough that if you had shamed him in the right way, it could have worked. And I've actually used that story in like weight loss ads and like for blood sugar products and stuff, because it's shaming. That telling that story is a form of shaming. You're not shaming the reader. You're giving them an example of what happens if you didn't do something. You didn't warn somebody. So that's an example. Of course, there's the slut shaming. People,
our favorite.
You will never, if you want to hear people like just get really upset, Jonathan, if you want to hear people get freak out and like get emotional, just talk about slut. Just say the words, slut shaming is not so bad. Just watch it and then just sit back and watch. Just like, I dare anyone, just go on Facebook and see, I'm not saying I'm going to slut shame But the people who do it have a point.
Ooh.
Just watch what happens. I mean, you will see like it's just nothing but like, because it's, they know it's true. The people understand it. That societally speaking, there's a reason why the cad knave was always driven out of town. The player, right? They didn't last long in ancient societies because they were like, they were the male version of that. Well, the town hoe isn't exactly the most respected person in the world. They're hurting themselves. Now, maybe they don't care about hurting themselves, but they're also an influence on other people in a negative way and all. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. If they have kids, those kids are negatively affected. And I have found one way to bring this up if you ever want to. I'm going to have so much hate after this, Jonathan. Is, let's say there's someone that who's a hoe, right? And it's negatively affecting her life. Like it's obvious, right? Like there's a lot of problems going on with this person. And you care about them. That's my whole point. It's got to be done because you care. You say things like, look, you got to really think about this. When you're 52 years old, do you want to have family and a stability or do you want to have a Match.com account? Like that's how I'm talking. I'm not saying you go point fingers at them, but you give them a vision of where things are heading. And this applies to anything you're selling and anyone you're trying to sell. Believe me, there's things I need to be shamed about, and there are people who do it, and I'm glad that they do it. It's very true. Sometimes I tend to be a little too potty mouthed and all that, and people brought that up. Said, Ben, I'm like, yeah, you got a good point. Thank you for telling me. And they weren't being jerks about anything, but they were shaming me. I didn't say go fuck off. So and it's stuff like that. It can't be done out of like spite or something like that. Then then I understand why people hate shaming because people do that. I'm not talking about that. Another form of shaming, Jonathan, and you probably know some people who could use this is the mush cookies. I was the mush cookie of all mush cookies, Jonathan, when I was in high school. I wish somebody had shamed me a hell of a lot more than when I got shamed. I got a little bit, shamed in certain ways, but the reality is, I had the right friends who, I basically got by based on social proof. Okay. But the reality is, I should have been shamed. And when you have guys now, John, this is something CNN has recently been talking about, where guys, they're actually making a case for guys should be okay with being openly cucked.
What?
You know what I mean? But you know what that means, right? Where a guy's girl, she goes with another man and he knows it and he's okay with it.
What is that about?
He's still, they're trying to make this mainstream now. It's the ultimate form of...
Guys are a bunch of pussies, dude, because, I saw this and I got sick of this, and I'm glad you brought it up. When my son came home, I had to take him to one of these little indoor playgrounds. And when I went there was a bunch of guys walking around like women, talking high pitched, like, oh, don't do that, all this shit. And I'm like, what happened to men? What happened to men? Where did people's testicles go?
Well, some people would tell you that it's soy. it's the
BPH in the plastic bottles, right?
It could be touching too many grocery store receipts because the guy shouldn't be going there anyway. I don't know. But this is going on, right? And there's a danger in that. Like that's bad. I don't see how this is good for society. So nobody's shaming these guys.
Oh,
white knight shaming. There's white knight shaming. Now deal like this one. So I know about this dancer chick, right? Very popular dancer chick. I forget her name. It doesn't really matter, but she's like out there. She's like I don't know if she's mainstream, but she's close enough to it. She gets interviewed by like entertainment magazines and all that about all this stuff. And she was like on social media somewhere. Now she's married. She is married to a man. This guy, in fact, this guy was like being a complete like idiot. He's like, he showed like a picture of the United States and says, I can't take my wife to any of these red states because she'll get shot by a Trump supporter. Something stupid like literally said that. I mean, it wasn't far from that. And so she's got a husband, right? And she'll talk about how she's like vacationing with her husband. But then she'll also go on social media and she'll say things like, sometimes I just want to lay around with someone attractive on Sunday morning.
Like what?
Like I'm telling you, this guy's being cocked. I guarantee it. And nobody's shaming him. Nobody is shaming him into like, strapping on the balls or hiking up the skirt, strapping on the balls and and being her husband. But this is probably the kind of guy that walks around with a vagina hat on all day.
Yeah.
But apparently they can't. Apparently, Jonathan, talk about shaming. Now this is shaming. So remember that last women's march thing where they were wearing vagina hats and all that?
Yeah.
You remember hearing about that, right? So this last one they just had, they said that the guys were not allowed to wear vagina hats there anymore because it offended the transsexual people. So they were shaming, So think about these vagina. The guy buys a vagina hat thinking he's going to be a white knight. He'll always be the friend, but never the boyfriend. But he's going because he thinks it's going to impress the girls, right? So he goes and buys this vagina hat, completely emasculates himself in the process, and then he's told he gets shamed about that he can't even wear that because they shame him out of not wearing that hat. So not only are the guys shaming him for being a complete pussy, but then the girls are now shaming him, saying, "Well, you can't be doing that. That's insensitive to." So it's just like, I don't know, man. We live in the most, and when in some ways we live in the most entertaining times. I mean, I can't imagine there ever be a more entertaining time than this. And unfortunately, it's not all gonna. This is all gonna end. There's no way this can keep up. There are hard times are on the way, and that's why we want to learn how to sell and persuade and learn how to build businesses.
No, how to learn how to shame. That's what we're doing with our son. Like, you suck at that. Do better. What happened to that? Like, what happened to being honest and letting the kids have to earn things? What's going on, Ben?
Well, there's no shame going on. That's the part. You cannot shame them anymore because that's insensitive and that all this other horse crap that's going on. So I don't know how many people are still with us right now, Jonathan.
I'm getting hate mail right now.
I suspect that you're about ready to do some angry push-ups, and I'm sure it's even worse for some people listening to us. But let's take this. I told you I'd take this to give some business examples, right? Now, every market you have people that on your list that need to be shamed into buying what you have, if you care about them. So, for example, I will regularly shame people who have a get-rich-quick mentality. Right? I already did. I did in this show already. Was it this show or last week where I talked? My mind is all over the place. Somebody needs to shame me into getting my concentration fixed. But we're talking about people who just want get rich quick and all that. Well, I will shame the hell out of them in my emails because here's why. There's two reasons. One, I don't want a get rich quick person to buy from me. I just don't want. They're the biggest pain in the butt customers. But at the same time, those who are intellectually on enough to be receptive to my shaming will change their wicked ways and become great customers. So I will write emails making fun of the dopamine drip that these guys get. And that's exactly what happens and anybody who sells in BizOp can tell you this. And if they're going to be intellectually honest, they go from one product to the next product to the next product to the next product, not because they're necessarily flaky people or anything like that, but they're literally addicted to the chemical reaction in their brain, the dopamine drip. In fact, one of your podcasters, are you still doing Michelle Spiva's podcast?
It's been a little while since she's done a show, but yeah.
Okay, but she's still one of your, okay. She's the one that taught me this. And it was completely opened my eyes to how that works. And it was a very brilliant observation on her part. And I've been thinking about it, and it's so true. So that's really why. So you have to shame them to some extent. You don't have to shame them to try to change them because you probably won't, but you're shaming your list so that they don't want to buy from you. So you're shaming them out of the sale. And you could do the same with the bright, shiny object syndrome, right? I'll talk about what I call the guru casino, where people get, they're doing something that works and then they get distracted by the bright, shiny lights and the beautiful sounds of the money that they hear in the guru casino, which is basically just a casino. It's designed to take all the money you have and keep you addicted to being there and never leave. They have no clocks in there. They don't want you to leave. They want to comp you to stay so you keep wasting more money and all that. And so I will write emails about that. Now, you have people listening to this have to look at their own market. What are they doing that you can shame them with? And again, you're not doing it to be mean. And you're using it, you're telling stories and analogies. You're not pointing a finger at anyone specific. But that is why shaming works, why it needs to be done more, and why I, Jonathan, I'm a big advocate for shaming. So that's all I got for this one. And I don't want to get you too worked up either. So next week, we'll talk about something a little bit less enraging, but still hopefully engaging. And that's it for this time.
All right. So that is another bensettle.com podcast in the can. Back in your earbuds next time. Thanks for tuning in.
You've been listening to the bensettle.com podcast. To download yourself a free issue of Ben's prestigious $97 per month email players newsletter, which is going to show you 24 ways to write emails people eagerly read, click, and buy from, head on over to www.bensettle.com. Well, off you go. You know it makes sense.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.